All right, we're going to try this again. I am recording on a microphone, and this is the whole reason I'm doing this. I wanted to share the story of the girl with the hair of gold with you. And this story I learned from Clarissa Estes out of Women Who Runs with the Wolves, and it comes from Europe. And it is a story that I found quite profound because it talks to me on different levels. It is a way that I can really begin acknowledging the nervous system and the wisdom of stories and teaching you about your inner workings. And in this story, there is a woman with the hair of gold. It's long golden hair, and she lives by herself in a small home cottage on the edge of a forest. And in her house, she weaves. She's a weaver. And on the walls are the weavings of her mother and grandmother and great-grandmother. And this is her passion. This is where she sings her songs. But she has to also go down to the town and go to the market to buy food and exchange some of her weavings, trade. And on her way home, a man from town, the coal burner's son, notices her and finds her beautiful. And one day he follows her home. And when she arrives, he comes out and he asks her to marry him. He desires her and finds her enticing. Well, she doesn't want to be beholden to anyone but herself and her work. And yet she's somewhat flattered by him. And she wants to show him, acknowledge him and give a part of her to him, gift something in acknowledgement. And so she takes her scissors and she cuts off her hair and offers him the hair. But he does not understand that this was something of worth to her. And he's pissed. He's angry. And he grabs the hair she's pulled together and he leaves and goes down to the market. And he attempts to give it to, trade it to the vendors there. And they do not see its worth. It was not meant for them. And he's even more angry at this point, and he's got so much rage that night he returns to her cottage and he murders her with his bare hands. And then he takes her body and he drags it to the side of a hill and he digs a deep grave and he dumps her body inside and covers it up. And nobody realizes that she's gone. And she kept to herself so much, they just didn't even notice. But her hair continued to grow. And it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew up the sides of the hillside. And eventually, the shepherds tending their sheep on the side of the hill began to notice the reeds. And one of them in particular went ahead and cut off one of the reeds and he fashioned a little flute and he began to play it. And as he did, the flute began to sing. Here lies the girl with the hair of gold, killed by the coal burner's son. Here lies the girl with the hair of gold, killed by the coal burner's son. And it was when the song was sung that not only her death was noticed, acknowledged, but that the coal burner's son was brought to justice. There may be a part of you that you've buried, that has been long buried. And you may even be having reeds come out of the side of your hillsides, and you might be spending a lot of your time trying to clear those reeds, making sure that no one plays their tunes or their songs. But they will continue to grow. We just have to acknowledge them. And possibly, once they are named and played, possibly acknowledge what parts of ourself killed ourselves. And maybe we feel as if somebody else did that killing, but we too were complicit. Complicit in the burial. It is through naming, it's the first step in neuroplasticity, according to Sarah Payton. You know, the parts of the brain where the unconscious amygdala stores this information bridges to our consciousness. And that first step is in naming. And it is through mindfulness and awareness of this that this is done. But what draws me to this story even more deeply, besides the fact that we have this unconscious trauma, and this is part of the first step in the map of that bridge, is the fact that the grandmother's tapestries and great-grandmother's tapestries are lining the cottage of the woman. And what we know of the cultures of Europe is that pre-Christianity, pre-conquest, at least recorded conquest, are the cultures that were indigenous to the area. And some of the ways that things were maintained were through weaving. And when women would weave on their own, in their rhythms and with their songs, this is the way that things were preserved. And yet many were still busy cutting down these reeds, trying to prevent discovery, prevent the return to that murder or that killing. And in what ways might we begin to bridge that unconscious to the conscious, but through naming and mindfulness? How are unconscious belief systems embedded in our nervous systems? How might you begin to track or hunt down the thing that killed you? Or maybe killed an ancestor or some part of you. Maybe it was a way that we learned to survive.